Three orders, part second. Subtopics: development of towns in the Middle Age, agriculture-related problems in Europe, existence of fourth order, emergence of cathedral towns, factors for the growth of nation-state, characteristics of managerial state, emergence of nation-state. Now, uh, causes for the development of towns in the Middle Age. In the Middle Age, the importance of towns increased a lot due to progress in commerce and trade. Many traders resided in towns. Towns were free from feudal control. There was no restriction on the movement of town people. Towns developed to this due to this freedom of town people. People inhabiting towns began to earn a lot of money with trade and became very rich. Abundance of wealth in towns also helped in the development of towns. In the Middle Age, towns developed due to progress of commerce and trade, increase in wealth and freedom from feudal life. Development of different crafts also helped in the development of towns. Gradually, traders and craftsmen living in the towns formed their guilds. These guilds took care of interests of their members in towns. The guilds of craftsmen was very rigid. A new craftsman was not made a member until he learned work from a competent craftsman and became skilled. Now, agriculture-related problem in Europe. There was quite primitive agriculture technology. Only one mechanical aid was available to the peasants, and that was wooden plough. It was drawn by a pair of oxen. Though this plough was only able to scratch the earth's surface, it was not possible for this plough to dig a deep and completely draw out the natural productivity of the soil. Therefore, hard labor was required for agriculture. After every 4 years, fields had to be dug by hand, which required very hard manual labor. An effective method of crops rotation was used. The whole of the land was divided into two parts. Wheat was sown in one half in winter and second half was left fallow. Rye was planted on this part of land next year, and then the first half was put to fallow. Effects on life of people. Soil was deteriorated with this system. Frequent famines occurred. Devastating famines and malnutrition made life very difficult for poor people. Now, in spite of agriculture-related problems, the lords wanted to increase their income, as it was not possible to increase agriculture production from the land. Lords forced the peasants to bring whole of the land in the manorial state under cultivation. Peasants were forced to do more work than legally bound time limit. But peasants did not go quietly in this operation and started passive resistance because they did not protest openly. They started to do more hard work on their fields and started to keep much of the produce that labor for themselves. They also started to avoid begar, unpaid extra service. The lords and peasants came in conflict with each other over pasture and forest land. This land was treated by the lords as their private property, while the peasants saw this land as a resource to be used by the whole community. Now next is how did fourth order of society came into existence? In Europe, many serfs who wanted to become free men were running away and hiding in towns. If any lord was unable to discover his serf for 1 year and a day, then he would become a free man. A number of people in towns were escaped serfs, and free peasants and unskilled labor was provided by them. Several shopkeepers and merchants were also there in towns. Later, a need was felt for individuals with specialized skills like lawyers and bankers. The population of the major towns was around 30,000. These were people residing in towns formed a fourth order of society. The guild was the basic of economic organization in Europe. Every craft or industry was organized into a guild. A guild was an organized association. Quality, price, and sale of the product was controlled by the guild. The guild hall was an important feature of every town. The guild hall was a building for ceremonial function and head of all the guilds met formally over here. Town's walls were patrolled by guards. Musicians were called to play in civic procession and or at feasts. Travelers were looked after by innkeepers. By the 11th century, new trade routes began to develop between Europe and most and guild was a trade routes began to develop between Europe and West Asia. Scandinavia merchants used to sail towards south from the North Sea so that they could exchange furs and hunting hogs for clothes. English traders came to sell linen. By the 12th century, commerce and crafts began to grow in France. Also, earlier craftsmen traveled from one place, one manor to another, but now they found that it is easier to settle down at one place, hence they would produce goods and take them for food. Trade started to expand with the growth of many towns. Towns merchants became rich and powerful. The competition to be included in the nobility also started among them. Now, emergence of cathedral towns. Rich persons made big donations to churches, so large churches began to be built in France. These churches were known as the cathedrals. Although the churches belonged to monasteries, yet different groups of people contributed to their construction with their own labor, money and material. It took many years to complete the cathedrals, which were made up of stones. During the course of construction, the area around the cathedrals became populated. They became centers of pilgrimage. When they were completed, thus small towns developed around them. These were known as the cathedral towns. The cathedral towns were designed in such a way that the voice of priests could be heard clearly to the people gathered in the hall, and the singing by monks could sound beautiful, except this chiming bells calling people to prayers could be heard from over a long distance. For windows in the cathedral stained glass were used during the course of the day. These glasses were made radiant by the sunlight for the people inside the cathedrals. After sunlight, they were made visible to the people outside by the light of candles. These stained glass windows had pictures related to the stories of the Bible, which could be read even by illiterate people. The Christian monks in monasteries, the medieval church and its Christian leaders pleased their followers to lead an ascetic life. Influenced by this preaching, many Christians gave up the worldly life and became ascetic. Ascetic men were called monks and women were known as nuns. All of them led a very simple life. They had to follow rigid rules of discipline. They had no right to be married and to have property. In case they violated the rules, they were severely punished. People living in monasteries worshipped God, gave for moral education to people, and served patients. The two merits and demerits of medieval monasteries. Medieval monastery system proved a blessing as well as curse for Europe. Merits. These monasteries worked as centers of education. As a result, knowledge spread in Europe. Trained monks worked as representatives of the medieval church and promoted the idea of purity, morality, devotion, renunciation, and discipline. Demerits. These monasteries accumulated vast tracts of land and abundant wealth. Corruption crept into monks and nuns lived lived together. They gave up the ideals of devotion and renunciation and led a corrupt and luxurious life. Factors that help in the growth of nation state. Decline of feudalism. Decline of feudalism weakened the power of feudal lords. So the powerful rulers took all authority in their hands. Middle class became powerful. Growth of commerce and trade increased the power of middle class. The middle class significantly contributed to the rise and growth of nation state. National language and literature. National language and literature in those languages are rendered a great help in the growth of nation state. The reign of new nation state was in the hands of powerful and astute rulers. Such a political system was set up in the country as ended anarchy. Besides the system of agriculture, regulated slavery was abolished forever. Three achievements of nation state. First, the subclass was abolished in the society. Besides, feudalism was abolished and agriculture, industry and trade were developed. As a result, living standard of people raised, improved. Boundary disputes were ended and safe boundaries were provided to states. Nation state established unity amongst people of a common language and common culture. Now, characteristic of managerial state. Almost everything was available in the state which was required for daily life. Peasants grew grain in the fields, lords' implements and weapons were maintained and repaired by blacksmiths and carpenters. Lords' building was looked after by stone masons. Fabric was spun and women and children used to work in the wine presses of the lord. Extensive woodlands and forests were there in the state where the lords used to hunt. Pasture were also there in the state where cattle and horse of the lord used to graze. A church and castle for defense was also there in the state. From the 13th century, some bigger castles were made so that it could be used by the family of the knight as its residence. The state was not self-dependent. It had to bring salt, millstones and metal utensils from outside. The lords spending a luxurious life also had to take costly items such as musical instruments and ornaments, etc. from other places. In many manors, a narrow balcony was there. There was a large hall where the people of the manor used to gather for meals. It was a gallery of the minstrels from where singers used to entertain the nobles. Now, the life of monks and nuns in the Middle Ages. Monks and nuns were a class of devout Christians. They were deeply religious people who lived isolated lives. They used to live in religious communities which were known as abbeys or monasteries. These abbeys or monasteries were often situated at places very far from human habitation. Vows were taken by monks and nuns to remain in the abbey for the rest of their life and to spend their time in study, prayer and manual work like farming. Both men and women were open to this type of life as men became monks and women became nuns, except in a few cases separate abbeys were there for men and women. Monks and nuns were not allowed to marry. Gradually hundreds of people joined the abbeys. Rules for monks and nuns. In Benedict, there was a manuscript with 70 chapters of rules which were followed by monks and nuns for many centuries. Here are some of the rules they had to follow. Permission to speak should rarely be granted to monks. Humility means obedience. No monk should own private property. Idleness is the enemy of the soul. So friars and sisters should be occupied at certain times in manual labor and at fixed hours in sacred reading. The monastery should be laid out in such a way that all necessities be bound within its boundaries. Be found within its boundaries. Water mills, garden, workshop. Now, that's all.